Matthew 10:34. Do not suppose I came to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. When coupled with Luke 19:45, it shows you that every church is wrong. Okay, the sword is to break down the family values. Okay, the American family values, the government family values, the white supremacist family values, right? The sword is going to divide the household, right? I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. He goes on to say, anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. And he redefines the family, right? Anyone who welcomes you welcomes me. Anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. He's not saying welcome the traitors in your family, but welcome those in the spirit of the Lord. Okay, so these kind of family values that are based on American propaganda, on white supremacy, on the church's continuities of mistakes in misinterpreting the scripture and downplaying the martial art order are not consistent with the Lord. And we see that definitively in Luke 19. Okay, and we'll get into that more later. Let's just go 45 for now. Then he entered the temple and began driving out those who were selling, right? Those who were selling, again, on the right, which is seen more as the Christian party, right? Christian conservatives. Is he talking about driving your truck and acting bad in the Luciferian American spirit? Or is he talking about driving out people like you who are trying to sell people their poisonous philosophies, their variations of white supremacy, their American propaganda, okay, their selfish worldly propaganda? No, he's not trying to empower you in the Luciferian doctrine, but drive out people, including people like you. Okay, you would not have welcomed somebody in the true spirit of the Lord back then, just like you do not welcome and stand with them right now. Politics. Speaking of politics, pole I, phallic symbol, polis, cult center, right? Politics, pole I ticks, right? Who gets to trick who into bed and why? And by tricking them, raping them, right? Selling them a false narrative like Jim Jones and his sex cult. There's a thin line between Jonestown and your average church these days because you are affecting the reproductive process by twisting truths to your advantage. All the churches are rape centers. All the movements we have are rape movements. You are lying to people. It's affecting their reproduction. And yes, sexual behavior in a consumer and highly sexualized society is very much the bell that rings the loudest in your greatest concerns. Generally speaking, and everyone else, as they're concerned about their people and their future for their race, we must secure a future for white children, being the kind of white supremacist saying. How do you do that, right? Where do these white children come from in the first place? Eugenics, Nazi eugenics, the Jewish flavor, American eugenics, Margaret Sanger, and so on and so forth. Yes, if you're not concerned with reproduction and eugenics as the main issue, you may as well put a hand over your mouth. This should be the emphasis of every political action. You are a fool if you don't see it that way. You need to address the reproductive cycle and highlight the ills of eugenics. Ignoring the obvious is one of the main problems in society. The way, the truth, and the life versus ignoring the obvious truths and twisting these things in a way that no righteous person, even a righteous kid, could respect. We look at looks and perceived skill in the martial arts, right? Perceived intelligence, perceived insight. This is the emphasis of Western martial arts. And when we look at the obvious, right? 37% of people say they prefer football, I suppose is what they're highlighting in this thing. It's the most popular sport, and 11% was assigned to basketball. One way or another, we have Sunday night football, okay? So they said it was something like 111 million people is the record viewing for a football game. I believe these statistics don't matter. We know that football is the most popular sport, okay? And we see displays of black physical prowess as well as whites, and blacks are 13% of America, whites are 70%. So ignoring the physical prowess of the black man and how it relates to generational physical prowess is silly, right? We see it in boxing, we see it in football, and the next most popular sport, basketball. Okay, then not far behind it is baseball, which is white people and doesn't really show physical prowess, right? Pitching, right? Hitting the ball. It's for the same reason they're wrong about martial arts. It's the same reason they're wrong about anyone who'd argue that baseball is really a sport that reflects physical prowess. A bunch of potbelly guys swinging a bat to hit a ball. It's very similar to a knight, right? Boxing and basketball have more in common with martial arts than baseball does. And of course, their warrior, quote-unquote, perspective is more like baseball than it is boxing, basketball, or martial arts. It's very straightforward. You're an idiot if you don't see it that way. So when we look at party politics being chosen because of social, political, and economic pressures around them. And of course, this relates to covering up the idea that these sports, right, boxing, football, basketball, where are the Jews in these sports? Where are the Asians, right? If they're the martial art races, right? As we see, Scott Atkins kind of look. Jean-Claude Van Damme has a kind of Jewish look, kind of the jackal kind of face, kind of elf kind of face, whatever you want to call it, kind of temple set kind of face. Again, I'm not saying they're bad people, but I do think it is disgraceful for them to pretend that they're the top martial artists when they're not even races that we associate with physical prowess, because it's not there. And yes, sports, there's a reason the T is the feminine suffix. It's taken certain ideas, certain physical traits, and making it a more watered down, kind of gender neutral, friendly spirit way. But absolutely, it has everything to do with coordination, athletic prowess, and physical prowess. Okay, so martial arts are basically taking these kind of geeky kind of people, kind of beta male types, and trying to impress upon you that they're the greatest warriors. Absolutely laughable, absolutely disgraceful. And anyone who knows anything about fighting after school and so on know that we do not see the martial artists beating up these other guys in schools. We see them absolutely taking part in fights until, of course, the UFC matches. But generally speaking, martial artists, in terms of striking and percussive skills, don't really impress upon society that their martial arts systems overcome races with more physical prowess. Generally speaking, the big football brute beats the shit out of the kind of white geek in the martial arts school. Okay, generally speaking, the kind of black thug beats the shit out of the kind of white geek martial artist. Now, mixed martial arts, which puts an emphasis on being tough and taking people down and beating the shit out of them. Generally speaking, they beat those other guys up. But in terms of ancient combat, has no really valid practical battlefield application, because it is about striking. But when you read between the lines, you look at who does what and why, and so on and so forth, you see that the intelligence that is being portrayed by these people is not there. If they were so smart, why couldn't they put one and one together and say, hey, it's a bad idea to get in a fight with this ghetto guy? They still get their ass beat. Okay, they don't have the insight to say, hey, I can't beat this guy up. And it's the same lack of insight, a similar lack of insight, that makes it so that they can't outmaneuver someone like me in ancient combat and kill them. It's the same appalling lack of living in reality, right? Their martial arts systems are based on illusion and kind of presenting someone in terms of that, and they don't really translate into that. Okay. So women reject the natural scale and targets, men who are targeted, whereas men will take on a hero psychology or actual heroism, which is rare, to date any attractive woman, including a woman who's targeted. So when we look at this dating cycle, right, women are more unfair to men who are targeted, handsome heroes with this kind of natural waterhole, love, romantic, grace-filled kind of attraction, kind of idea, than men do. Women are more unfair. Men are kind of chasing women, and this is part of how women manipulate men. In a gender-neutral society, it favors the woman. When it comes to judgment in dating, it actually favors the man, because where it matters most, women shun men like me, whereas men will not shun the female counterpart. And this has everything to do with the Carlton Well, Beauty and the Beast. The idea of a ruffian being willing to date a graceful, beautiful woman, whether she's targeted or not. So, if you don't understand what I'm getting at, you're a fucking moron. I have no time for that. Moving on. Segregation. The unofficial segregation of society, right? Gentrification. Okay? Redlining. Okay, we look at Washington, D.C., right? Being the problems that face the country that show that the politicians are incompetent and the political parties are a disgrace are right there in their backyard, right? Washington, D.C., drugs, prostitution, crime. And they can't not address it. So it's kind of the same idea with having a distant partner. You can integrate black people into places like Santa Cruz and San Francisco, and you can have a certain distance between them as these rich white yuppies walk down the street and the poor black people from Fillmore and Hunters Point and so on pass by them, right? They're distant. They may as well be segregated, and to a degree when you look at housing and who lives where and why, they are segregated. So even in multicultural cities, there's gentrification, redlining, and segregation. You're an idiot if you don't get that. So when we look at the problems in society, it reflects a cultural sickness. Eugenics seeks to breed people out and to ignore ill-gotten gains. When you yuppie sickos and you dumb, shallow fucks breed out the people who are victims of your insanity and your misleadership, you can't then turn around and say we've accomplished lower poverty, we've lowered the crime rates, there's less disease, there's less pollution, right, and harmful emissions, there's less resource consumption, and people are in better health. You cannot honestly say that's an accomplishment. That is just a bunch of evil scum, a bunch of indifferent rich yuppies killing off the people they have victimized generation after generation. You old money scoundrels and your slut allies, no matter how good you look, are a disgrace, I assure you. Okay, you can fool the masses of brainwashed cowards some of the time, but you can never fool a true martial artist any of the time. A true top martial artist at that. So you are corporate survival scum, and to who benefit, right? And what shape are you in? You are in the shape of whores that go to gyms to become sluts, of shallow liberals. You are in the shape of scum that have conformed to corporate philosophies and not martial art women who are willing to die for their righteous husbands. You are in demonic, sinful, and scoundrel, old money sponsored, despicable, hell-brought, hell-derived war shape, right? Who are you benefiting? Those who are more fit to survive in hell, in a demonic planet, in a pathetically evil and indifferent, fake, hypocritical abomination of a world. Okay. Luke 19:38. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Not some conformist bitch, not some corporate friendly coward, but the King who comes in the name of the Lord. He might have a spear and a hut in some underdeveloped nation, but if he comes in the name of the Lord, he's blessed. Not if he's rich and so on and so forth. He's spiritually blessed. This is what really matters. We don't care about having riches and stuff. It goes back to James 5, 1 through 7, and Matthew 19, 23 and 24, where he says, then Jesus said to his disciples, truly I tell you, it is hard for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. And we'll get into that with the blind men. Okay, so that takes us to John 9:2. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus responds, neither. Okay. He says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. Look at these hypocritical conservative churches and so on, these churches who say that, look at these underdeveloped nations. Why doesn't God bless them, right? You don't even know the four Gospels about Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? You don't even know that, and you're going to make this argument? Right there in John 9, okay, right there, okay? It says, neither of them have sinned to cause this. This happens so that God can show you, reveal to you the truth. And it's the same thing in the poor. You look at the poor's face, they come off as spiritual and righteous. It goes back to Matthew 19, 23 and 24. Again, you don't know your four most important gospels for you New Testament thumpers, right? James 5, 1 through 7. It is a disgrace to make that argument. You are Satanists. God does not know you. You have to tell the complete truth. This is not some matter of saving face. It affects politics. It affects reproduction. It affects people's behavior. It affects their ability to go to heaven. This is not no small issue. I suggest you stop immediately. You are false prophets, you are false disciples, you are false apostles, and so on.